much for joining us today. We're celebrating World Oceans Month this month all through June. And one of the things that we wanted to do was kind of talk about the different aspects of ocean and wildlife conservation and help our supporters get involved. So during the month, we have different conservation panels designed to focus on different topics. And today's research. So all three of you help save a species and research wildlife. And I was hoping that each one of you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your research focus when you do. So Sara Hoffman, if you would like to introduce yourself first.
Sure. So I'm Sara Hoffman. I'm a scientist at Biomark in the Applied Biological Services Division. And Biomark is a company that develops primarily tagging technology to aid in wildlife research. And as a part of the Applied Biological Services, I actually work on developing analytical tools that help advance wildlife conservation efforts.
Awesome. And we work with you as well, right here at Loggerhead Marinelife Center.
Yep, Justin and Sarah are big collaborators of mine, so I'm excited to be here today. Thanks for having me. Once upon a time, I used to be in the marine world. I started off my career as a shark physiologist in South Florida, down at Florida Atlantic University.
And that's great. Thank you for joining us, Sarah. We're excited to have you. And Sarah, if you'll tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's Sara Hersh. I am the Senior Manager of Research and Data at Loggerhead Marinelife Center in Juno Beach, Florida. So I work in the research department. We are focused on studying the nesting population of sea turtles. Loggerhead Marinelife Center is fortunate enough to be located right across the street from Juno Beach, which happens to be a major nesting ground for 3 species of sea turtles. And they come in fairly high densities in our area. So we have a lot of animals that we can research, which is great. And so I'm primarily interested in the nesting biology of sea turtles and how we can protect them on our beaches.
And Sarah, I know you're always out there at night, so thank you for joining us during this daytime experience. And Dr. Justin, will you shed a little light as well?
Yeah, so Sarah kind of covered, where I work as well. So I also work at Loggerhead Marinelife Center, and I'm the Director of Research. So again, Sarah and I are working Sara Hersh and I are working very closely this summer on a lot of the nesting population and the nighttime tagging and research work that we do. My primary research focus is on sea turtle or marine organismal health, and do a little bit of toxicology research. And our department has also kind of started looking at the impacts of nest temperatures on health and reproductive success of turtles on our beaches. So we do all kinds of research projects out there, but my primary interests are health related.
So we all know here at Loggerhead Marinelife Center, we think all the science researchers have the coolest jobs. I work in the marketing department, and we're always jealous. And I think a lot of our social media viewers think that as well. On our social media account, I'm sure Biomark's social media account too, we receive a lot of messages about how our researchers first got involved in helping save a species. How does one even go about doing that? So we really want to provide them with a little advice and some stories about how you first got involved with helping save a species. And Dr. Hoffman, I'll turn it over to you again.
Sure. So I come from a landlocked state. I'm in Boise, Idaho. So the ocean was kind of this very novel, idealistic thing for me. And so when I went into college, I sort of did the traditional, I'm going to go get a biology degree and then go be a doctor and, kind of that standard career path. And as an undergraduate, I was really fortunate to get involved in undergraduate research opportunities at Clemson University. And they had a great outreach program where I was able to get involved in marine research, starting with corals. And that experience really opened up my eyes to how little we know about the marine environment and how much it's being affected right now. So that really drove my passion towards that marine environment and kind of away from the human biology sciences. And ever since then, I've been an avid scuba diver, and I love spending as much of my time as I can outside. And now I'm just really passionate about making sure that the things that I love about the environment continue to stick around.
And you said something that I think a lot of our followers and supporters ask too. Does it help to have some of those certifications to become a researcher in wildlife? You mentioned scuba. Do those help? Would you recommend those, especially for marine biology?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it really depends on what you're interested in. So, for example, I know Sara and Justin spend a lot of their time on the beach. So I don't know that a scuba certification would necessarily be helpful for them. But it was just one of those things, I've always been told that if you do what you love, it's never work. And so for me, I really fell in love with scuba diving and I followed that passion and tried to incorporate that into my work life. So I think that finding something that you love and however you can become an expert in that hobby or that field is only going to help you further down the line if you do decide to pursue that as a career choice.
That's great advice. I know Justin and Sara have definitely told me similar comments before as well. And one other question, Dr. Hoffman. So when you started researching a species, was there an animal that you were really drawn to and you want to learn more about? Or did you kind of just happen into research and then you started just kind of following more that research path of opportunities?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think fish have always been super interesting to me. They're so diverse. There's so many different kinds. They all look different. And so when I went into grad school, my graduate background is primarily in sharks. And there was something very enticing and charismatic about sharks. They're so neat. And when you see them in person, it's just kind of humbles you a little bit and reminds you of your place in the world. And so I really loved that about working with sharks specifically.
I can definitely see that as well. Yeah. I think for anyone that grows up on the coast, we have a little bit of a different perspective because we may see these animals in the wild, especially on our South Florida beaches. But it's kind of interesting that, you came from a landlocked state, but you still made your way to the coast. And then Sara Hersh, can you tell us a little bit about how you became involved with saving a species?
Yeah, so, I grew up kind of always interested in marine life. I don't know really where it came from, but from an early age, I was the one that was super interested in like the sea cucumbers and like the weird animals that most people are interested in, dolphins. And I kind of gravitated towards like the more unique organisms that we didn't really, study as much in school maybe. And so I always kind of was interested in that. And so I knew I wanted to go into biology going into undergrad, but I wasn't really sure where that was going to lead me or what was going to happen from there. And so I started taking internships and just working in a bunch of different environments just to see what was interesting to me. So I actually first started out doing freshwater stream macroinvertebrate stuff with an internship. And, I liked that work, but I just had this pull towards the marine environment I don't really know why. It just, again, there's a lot we don't know about the oceans. And so that kind of really intrigued me that there was this whole world out there that we didn't really know that much about. And so I kind of moved into the marine environment. Again, I stuck with water quality. So I started, my next internship was doing water quality in the marine environment. And then finally, I took an internship working with sea turtles. And I kind of just happened to take that internship. It happened to be with sea turtles. And once you start working with certain organisms, you just realize how much we don't know, and every little bit you learn, you start asking more questions, and so it kind of draws you in. And so that's kind of how I ended up here, and I've now been working with sea turtles for about 10 years.
And that's awesome. We're lucky to have you. Sarah, something that you kind of touched on the lines of is, you know, we get questions on our social media and through email at LMC from individuals of all ages, but a lot of individuals that are younger or the ones that are currently in college, and they ask for like, what advice do we have for guiding them in the right research direction? And I heard you mention just like, you know, exploring the different type of research there's out there about different animals. If someone's really interested, do you recommend possibly like finding a researcher that does research you're interested in and possibly reaching out to them, or would you recommend that?
Yeah, so internships are a great way not only to learn about what your interests are, but just to make connections. So they're short. So if you don't like it, it's not that much of your life that you're wasting. And you never know who knows who and what connections are made. And there have been some really wacky, connections of 7 degrees of separation that can really get your foot in the door later down the line. So getting internships, Sara mentioned working in an undergrad lab. That's another great way to get involved. I didn't have as much of an opportunity to do that at the school I went to, but a lot of folks I know have really figured out what they want to do and made some great connections through working with undergraduate professors. And I will say that, even if the research doesn't line up exactly with where you want to end up, the skills that you'll learn, even if it doesn't directly align with where you see yourself going, just getting some of that basic skill set, when we hire people at Loggerhead for seasonal work, we're looking for people that already have some field experience. It doesn't matter what kind. It doesn't necessarily have to be with sea turtles, but getting that background in lab work, field experience, all of that can help. And then another suggestion, if those resources aren't available to you, or you're younger or older and no longer in school, reach out to local organizations, local conservation organizations, your local zoo. There are a lot of places where you can volunteer and kind of build those experiences and skill sets.
Yeah, just like we have a database of over 800 volunteers, and a lot of them actually assist in our rehabilitation or education program, and they're helping save the species a little differently, but still doing that great work that's essential. And Dr. Justin, could you shine a little light on your experiences? And I know Sarah kind of made a comment about falling into connections, and you never know. And I know you've had a lot of connections in.
Well, I'll say both the Sarahs are gonna make them sound a lot more responsible than I am. So my path was a little different. I also grew up semi-landlocked. So I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee. We were bordered on the western side by the Mississippi River, but that's it's really dirty and nobody wants to go play in that. So I just my fascination with animals just started just with my family. We always like I've said before, is any animal was really welcome in our house. We always had a menagerie of pets growing up, and so I always had this kind of connection with animals growing up, and I knew I wanted to go into the animal field, and so I went to school for marine biology. I did my undergrad, and I knew I wanted a graduate degree, but I procrastinated heavily. And so how I got into sea turtles was that was the only graduate school that I got into because I waited so long to apply to most of them. So I just kind of fell into sea turtles and had a little bit of experience with them prior to going into graduate school. I did an internship at the North Carolina Aquarium at Fort Fisher, where I was actually an education intern. And then they hired me on kind of year round after that as an educator, kind of on the weekends while I finished school. And, you know, there I did develop a passion for education. But, you know, the research was really kind of what really interested me. And so I got into graduate school at Florida Atlantic University and did my research on leatherback health and toxicology in Juno Beach with the Marine Life Center. And kind of moved around the state. I actually followed Sara Hersh around for a little bit. So I graduated from Florida Atlantic with my PhD, and then I went to Mote Marine Laboratory where Sara was for a postdoc fellowship. Sara since left and came to Loggerhead Marinelife Center, and then a couple of years later, I followed her back over to the East Coast to where I am now. So, you know, and it's just a really nice place to be. The nesting beach that Sara and I run, are, you know, it's truly incredible. It's you know, unbelievable to see sometimes hundreds of sea turtles in a single night, and, you know, just each of them are different, and it really keeps the drive going because the work never really gets old. It gets tired, you know, we get tired, but the animals kind of keep us going because they're all just unique and special. And, you know, like they both kind of said, is, you know, you answer one research question and it leads to, you know, 5 others. And so your work really is never done.
And Justin, you just mentioned something that, you know, I think is interesting. So our beach is home to a very highly densely nested sea turtle beach, correct?
Yes. Yep.
So if you're possibly interested in studying sea turtles, this might be a good area for you to explore and gain research. Not necessarily the only one, but it might be. So if you're interested kind of in a specific animal, would you recommend that people could maybe look at those locations and possibly reach out to those locations for a better chance of researching that species?
Yeah, I think that's kind of how everybody really gets started in the, you know, research, the biology research field, is you have a species or a topic that's of interest to you. You know, like Sara Hoffman is interested in kind of form and function of animals and how that differs. And so, you know, and then I was interested in physiology. And so you kind of just look for either an undergraduate advisor or an internship or, you know, something like that, or a graduate advisor that falls into kind of a similar category of what you're interested in, and reach out. And, you know, sometimes you get lucky and they respond, and sometimes they don't. And sometimes people have room for you and money for you, and sometimes they don't. But, you know, that's why it's important to be persistent and keep trying with those kinds of things. But yeah, the most important thing with that is kind of doing your research ahead of time. So really figuring out who does what. If you really like that, you know, read some of their papers or some of their research interests, and then reach out and kind of go from there.
And I always say, you know, follow an organization on social media. You'll definitely get to learn a little bit about their research. So we actually post a lot about our researchers' findings and publications, as well as our collaboration with Biomark and Dr. Hoffmann. So it definitely helps you find resources like that as well. Well, we're about to hit my favorite question. I love asking this, people. But what's the most inspiring part of your job? You know, I know all of you have really long days and nights, and sometimes those days and nights blur into each other, and it can be a lot at times. But what's so inspiring that keeps you guys doing what you do every day?
So I think, you know, I'm really lucky in that I get to work with everything from sea turtles to salmon to penguins. And I think it's really neat when researchers are able to take these techniques and adapt them to their own study system. And I think probably the most inspiring thing for me is when it works, because I think that I won't speak for Justin or Sara, but they probably feel the same, that in science, a lot of it is figuring out how things don't work. So then that 5% of the time that it does work, it's like the greatest feeling in the world.
That's awesome. And do you have one of your favorite moments in your career? It could have been from undergrad or grad school or presently.
Yeah, so I think probably the coolest thing I've done in grad school, I was really fortunate to work with the National Marine Fisheries Service, and I was on a boat about 250 miles offshore of eastern Canada, tagging shark bycatch. And while I was out there, I saw species that I didn't even know existed, you know, ocean sunfish and beaked whales and all of this crazy diversity of wildlife that I would have never known existed, let alone had the opportunity to see in person, and lots of endangered species of sharks and things like that. So that's probably been one of the best experiences I've had in my career.
I can't relate because I haven't had those experiences, but I can relate a little with seeing a leatherback on the beach. I did a ride along with Dr. Justin and Sarah, and saw a little bit over a 900-pound leatherback, and those moments definitely just remind you, it just reminds you how precious life is and how magnificent some of the creatures in our ocean are. So it definitely inspires even my work to just create better blogs or better images and really document the research that these conservation centers are doing.
Absolutely.
But Sarah, can you tell us about what's the most inspiring part of your job?
Yeah, so I think with sea turtles specifically, it's so resilient. So again, we work on the nesting beaches, and one of the projects we're looking at this year is documenting the injuries that these animals have, and so whether or not that be from natural predators like sharks or from human-related causes, so fishing line entanglements or unintended boat strike injuries. We actually see a lot of females that have some pretty bad injuries from these different sources, and it's just amazing to me that they are still out there, still reproducing. They just do what they do and come up onto the beaches and still, despite various injuries, we have some turtles that can't dig properly with their rear flippers, and so we have to go in and kind of help them dig their egg chambers. But it's just very cool to see that these animals are so resilient and the way that they can heal from some of these injuries that we're documenting.
I know it amazes me too. You shared a lot of stories about some of the different sea turtles that have nested on our beaches, and I know Justin has shared some of the images as well. And one that stuck out in my mind is Juno and Electra, who have scars and divots all over their backs. Yet, like you said, Juno has been nesting for almost 20 years, which is pretty amazing. And they just keep doing what they can do. And it also highlights the impact that humans have, right? Maybe we could work together to make them have a little safer of an environment so they don't have to go through all these struggles and obstacles just to do what they naturally need to do and continue the species. Sarah, what's one of your favorite moments that you've had while researching a species?
That is a great question. So I don't know. Maybe it's just because it's so recent, so fresh, but literally last night, going back to kind of Sara Hoffman's comment about research doesn't always go the way you think it's going to go. So we have a project going on right now. We're actually satellite tracking some nesting loggerheads on our beaches. So we affix a satellite transmitter that basically sends location information up to the satellites and then back down to us, and we can track them in near real time. So we kind of know where they are and what they're doing. Well, we encountered one of the satellite tag turtles on the beach a couple nights ago, and we attempted to offload some of the data from the tag, and it did not go as planned. And the cord that basically plugs into the satellite tag and connects it to the computer, we couldn't get in right. It malfunctioned. And so this turtle left the beach with a tag that was no longer operational. And those tags are quite expensive. They're a couple $1,000s. So it was really disheartening. But then last night, we found a needle in the haystack. I won't say we, Justin was out on the beach and found the needle in the haystack and actually found the turtle back on the beach nesting. And we were able to reconnect the tag and get the tag transmitting again and working again. So that's kind of one of those unique stories that, field work doesn't always go as planned. Things things happen. But it ended up being a good news story in the end.
And I think it's important to point out that I know you guys have stressed this a lot when we send media members out with you. You know, when you are working with a wild animal with wildlife, you know, it's going to be unexpected. You can't control them. They're living animals, and you're also often dealing with the weather as well. We just experienced this that past Friday with the monsoon when we were trying to film some of our next turtles. So I love that all three of you guys just know that you really have to be open and try to find other solutions or other ways around to make your work. And while you may have these failures or these errors, like Sara Hoffman said, you know, there is that 5% chance that it will work, or, you know, there's that luck that it'll come back. We just have to keep hopeful and keep moving and not get discouraged. And I think that speaks to the environmentalism movement as a whole. You know, you're going to have setbacks, you're going to have abruptions, but you just have to keep hope and finding ways to improve the planet. So I love that. Dr. Justin, can you tell us a little bit about what's most inspiring for you?
Yeah, so I'll try to be a little bit different here. I think, you know, what's really cool is, you know, working at LMC is, you know, obviously we love working with the turtles and, you know, all marine species really that, you know, we come in contact with, and those are really what keep us going. But, you know, working at LMC is just inspiring in itself. You know, oftentimes the research and rehab departments are really kind of always in front of the camera, and because we are the ones that are interacting with the animals, but nothing that we do is accomplished alone. And, you know, there's not a single research project that I've ever done that I have done completely by myself. And so, you know, you kind of realize that everybody that you work with helps you accomplish your goal. So, you know, both Sarah's and I collaborate on research projects, and we help each other in that way. But, you know, we also have our education department that translates what we find into, you know, something that's less, you know, scientific jargon and a little bit easier to understand for, you know, school children, all the way up to adults. You know, we've got our conservation department that's out there cleaning our beaches, cleaning our piers, getting the word out there about, you know, pollution and things like that. We've got, you know, our rehab team that's saving turtles on a daily basis. And then, you know, the people that are always behind the scenes that really get this information out there as well, like the marketing department. You know, we've got our finance team that keeps us up and running and, you know, lets us spend our money when we need it. And, you know, our development team that brings in the money. And so it's you know, every step of the way, what you do is collaborative, and, you know, everybody at LMC is truly dedicated to our mission. And, you know, that's really inspiring to work with an entire team that, you know, during a 2-month shutdown when, you know, we have such a limited staff, we really never stopped. And our work kept going on the beaches and the hospital, you know, online and through outreach and, you know, our education teams and all of that. So that's, you know, it's really nice to work in a center with that amount of dedication.
I definitely agree. And from all the collaborations and partners that you guys have in research, and I know Biomark works with a ton of organizations and researchers. You know, every time we work with a researcher that works in wildlife conservation, they usually always say yes, which is really inspiring to me. You know, even if it's just coming from our social media account and we message them, or if it's about an opportunity, I find that everyone that kind of works in conservation really is just trying to do what's best for the planet and help it keep going. So no matter what you work in. And Justin, what's one of your favorite moments from working in research and saving a species?
Yeah, I have two. I'll give you the Cliff Notes version. So, you know, I did a summer of my research during my PhD in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands, studying the leatherback population there. And it was a very difficult and trying time. You know, that beach is remote. It's all done. Everything was done on foot. So we were walking, you know, 10 miles a night, you know, trying to encounter these animals with heavy backpacks and keeping our samples and doing all of that. And so naturally we took naps in between patrols and we had no turtles. And there was one time where I, you know, fell asleep on the beach and had my alarm set and woke up to the alarm, and I had no turtles around me when I fell asleep, and I woke up and I had 3 leatherbacks surrounding me. And,
wow.
You know, it's just really cool to be, you know, I was on their beach. You know, the species, the leatherback in particular, has been around for about 100 million years. And, you know, to just kind of allow me to kind of share their beach with them was really cool. Another one is I went out with my graduate advisor and her husband to do some diving work with very small leatherbacks that were raised in the lab. And, you know, we were in the open ocean and, you know, jumped in the water to look at how these animals are diving. And all you see is this blue, vast expanse of just blue all the way down. And it really makes you it really kind of made me realize how small we are and how little we know, because, you know, in that moment, it was just little tiny me in this giant, you know, ocean basin. And, you know, that was kind of really cool.
And I love moments like that. For me, I just had that when I was going out on the beaches with you two, and we're seeing 900-pound leatherbacks just on the beach coming out, and you're just watching them arise from the darkness of the waters and come up on our nest. And it's those moments. And I encourage everyone that has the opportunity to find a way to experience wildlife, but also respect the boundaries. We do deal with an endangered and threatened species. And it's important to know the actual regulations so we're not infringing or disrupting their natural nesting behaviors or whatever behaviors that they might have. So, Sara, Dr. Hoffman, can you tell us a little bit about some of your favorite research and the most interesting things about your research?
Sure. So now mostly what I work on is developing tools, whether it be analytical or physical tools like a tag, that make wildlife research easier and more accessible. So one of the projects that I'm working on right now, we're using machine learning algorithms, so something similar to like facial recognition, in order to identify features in drone imagery. And we know that drones are a really safe and cost-effective way to cover large areas of habitat. So instead of sending out, you know, an expensive ground crew and potentially disturbing habitat or disturbing animals, we have a more effective way to go out and get that same level of data. So being able to work on tools like that, or kind of reiterating what Justin said, I think that the nature of this work is so collaborative, so that even on projects like I'm working on with Justin and Sara to connect researchers worldwide, it's all about getting the data out there and leveraging the data to their fullest potential, getting at this mission, which is to conserve the environment and the species.
And has there been anything really interesting that you've seen about how making that data more accessible has really like helped propel saving a certain species or a certain project that you've seen really make a difference?
Yeah, and I think there are actually, you know, a ton of species or a ton of examples throughout the literature. And I think sort of the number one takeaway is that, especially for migratory animals, particularly like sea turtles or sharks or a lot of these marine species, is that they don't really care about our human instituted borders or countries or anything like that. So when we can share data openly and connect with researchers in parts of the world that we wouldn't have otherwise, we're really looking at the full life cycle and getting a complete picture of what's going on, rather than just what we can geographically access or what we are able to control within our little regional area.
For me, that's something I find really interesting about all the research and conservation is that migratory movement. You know, there's so many species in the wild, in the ocean that know no bounds, just as you said. And when you start thinking about it that way, if conservation organizations worked in silos and didn't share data and didn't share information, you really don't have the most accurate research that you could have. And if you're trying to protect the species, you might not be as informed as you think you are. So I think it's really important having that access to data and that collaborative movement across the world as well. So it's awesome that you guys are doing that and helping everyone have more effective research practices. Sara, can you tell us a little bit about some of the aspects of your job that you find interesting, your research?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on the satellite tagging project that I was working on, so I'll touch on a different project. So I am interested in nesting biology and the nesting beaches that are available to sea turtles. And so, sea turtles rely on beaches for their reproduction, and beaches are also heavily used by people. And so we have a large population that lives on the coast. And so they're sharing this habitat with sea turtles. And by building houses and condos and all sorts of stuff along the beach, we're actually altering some of the natural processes that beaches go through. So they naturally erode and accrete sand, and the beach changes over time. And when we build our houses and infrastructure right on the coastline, we can actually prevent some of those natural processes from happening. And so that's kind of the situation we're finding ourselves in, especially with sea level rise and climate change. We're having to figure out new solutions to be able to share the beaches with other organisms. And so one of the things I'm interested in is that we know a lot of people have in the past built seawalls, so either metal or concrete structures to protect their homes and their infrastructure from major storms and storm surge. But we know that those structures can actually erode the beach even more, and that decreases the amount of nesting habitat for these animals. And so there's a structure that I'm interested in that I've been looking at called a geotube or geocore. It's a little bit hard to explain, but essentially they're large sandbags that are placed at the base of the dune, and then they're buried with additional sand on top. So when you look at it, it just looks like a natural dune system. And so I'm interested in how these structures can be used to maybe increase the available amount of nesting habitat for sea turtles, and if they have any downsides, or if they're better or worse than seawalls in protecting inland infrastructure as well as creating habitat for sea turtles.
And that's something I love about your research because, I think especially I'm more familiar with South Florida because that's where I'm born and raised, but in South Florida, when it became inhabited and more developed, like with the current cities that we have, we really didn't know much about the wildlife on this area. And we even see that with our founder, Eleanor Fletcher, who moved to this area. Her husband was in real estate, and she only started to learn about sea turtles because she started walking the beach and started witnessing them. But a lot of the times when the developments were built on the coastlines, we didn't have that intel. We didn't have that information to inform the infrastructure guidelines and regulations. And I know, especially in South Florida, we've adjusted some of those guidelines, especially due to climate events like hurricanes, or research that you're informing. But it's really important that we continue to explore those questions that I think aren't the most, they're not the most at the forefront of everyone's mind questions, right? Like, you're not really thinking about seawalls. If you're a regular beach goer, you're probably thinking more about the turtle's health itself. But you really do have to assess the environment and assess those infrastructures that might affect the turtle. And I know you guys do a lot on lighting as well, lighting on buildings. So it's all the components around the coastline and not just the actual turtle itself or what it's experiencing in the ocean. It's everything around it. So for me, that's something that I've always thought that was interesting about you guys. And I'm glad that you explore all of the research that there is, from blood types to nesting chambers to seawalls to sand types and everything in between, because you really are trying to make the most informed decisions as you can, and the best practices for humans and wildlife to cohabitate the same area. Justin, could you tell us about some of the aspects you find most interesting about your research?
Yeah, Sara Hersh had mentioned the satellite tagging project, and what's kind of unique or kind of interesting about research projects is there's never just, you don't just get one set of data and it's published as one project and then that's it. So, Sara Hirsch is leading this, satellite tagging project. And then I've kind of been able to piggyback alongside of that and, collect blood samples from those animals so we can understand the physiology of nesting a little bit better, because, we know when those turtles are coming back, and, we hope to re-encounter them. And so by getting these kind of repeat blood samples from these animals as they lay multiple clutches during the season is really cool. And, it's a different kind of avenue of research that we haven't really pursued yet at Loggerhead. So that one's kind of fun. But I just had a paper actually released this weekend that was probably my favorite I've ever been a part of. And what we did is we put temperature data loggers in the nests of loggerhead sea turtles across the nesting season so that we could really understand how temperatures change as the season goes along. So, loggerheads start nesting in April, and then they kind of peak in the end of June and start tapering off towards the end of July and August. And so we were able to kind of understand those temperature profiles across the season. And then what we also did in conjunction with that was sample the hatchlings that came out of those nests where we had recorded the temperatures, and we analyzed the health of those hatchlings and the size and a bunch of different things. And sea turtles don't have sex chromosomes, so turtle the temperature of the environment that it incubates in. So again, everybody on this call has heard this 100 times, but we remember it with hot chicks, cool dudes. So hot nests lead to females, and cooler nests lead to males. But nobody's, so we're kind of, with temperature rising, we really only kind of a lot of people are only talking about feminization of the population. But what we found in our research is that a lot of these turtles, or these hatchlings that are coming out of these really warm nests, are of suboptimal health. So they had indicators of dehydration and stress and inflammation. So in those turtles that were from May, they were more robust and healthy than those turtles that came out in July when it was really hot. And so, sex or gender is not the only thing that we really need to worry about. It's also the quality of the animals that these nests are producing, and that is determined a lot by these nest temperatures. And that was a collaborative study between University of South Florida and University of Florida. Again, nothing that we do is accomplished alone. I think you're muted.
That's really interesting that you talked about that, because I think when, a lot of the public, probably not people who work in research, but when they think about saving a species, I think a lot of it is physical action they can take, like reducing their use of plastics, or, wearing polarized sunglasses when they're on a boat in the water, things that they can actually change to their daily lives, but they're not always thinking about the other factors that affect a species' health, such as you mentioned, like nesting temperatures, and really having more robust hatchlings come out at a specific time of day or a specific time of the year. And, it just speaks to the actions that we can take as a whole to improve the climate overall, and just being more aware of what's happening and our human impact on the species as a whole. One of the next questions I'm really interested in are, what are some of the alarming trends you've recently seen develop that pose a threat to some of the wildlife that you are researching or have researched? Dr. Hoffman?
Ooh, I get it easy since I get to go first. I think across the board, the major answer is climate change. So sorry, guys, I took that one. I think that as we see changes in not only the warming of the planet, but also the effects that we see in the frequency of storm systems. Up here in Idaho, we see changes in the amount of snowpack that we have, which is going to affect our riverine environments. So as we see the global climate changing as a whole, we know that's going to have huge impacts on the animals, what access they have to habitat, how quality that habitat is, if there's any type of migration corridor between suitable habitat, things like that. And I guess I can speak a little bit to maybe some of the stuff that happens in the Pacific Northwest. So we do see some amount of habitat degradation that occurs with other anthropogenic influence, like habitat degradation. We know that things like agriculture are removing a lot of water from our natural environments. So there's obviously a really delicate balance between maintaining our, economic system and maintaining our environmental system. So that's something that only becomes harder as the climate becomes less predictable and is changing, and we don't have any, it's a new situation as we move forward. So we're still trying to establish those baseline understandings of how our environment is functioning today and how that's going to be affected given different climate scenarios.
And that's the motto of our World Ocean Month, really, is that, one ocean, one world, everything's connected. And we've been really trying to stress that with our messaging, especially this year, just because I think we are starting to, when I say we, the general public's really starting to realize that every animal relates to another animal. We all share the same air, the same water, the same land, and these storms, the wildfires, anything like that, it's affecting all the species. And if we don't take action with our human impact, we are going to lose some of these habitats and some of these species. I know Australia is still battling some of their wildfires that they're experiencing at the beginning of the year, and that just seemed to devastate a lot of the koala land as well. So just being more globally aware and taking action with that. With that, Dr. Hoffman, do you have any advice for how the public can help improve their actions or help take action?
Yeah, so I think that it really starts at a local level and kind of taking a look at what you can do within your community. I think it's really great to think globally, and there are some really great organizations that you can get involved with that do that as well. But if everybody focuses on their area and what they can do within their community, I think that's a really good step forward. So, I think LMC is a great example of an organization that if you're in that area of the world, you can get involved in either volunteering or things like that. And we have the same sort of resources in Idaho. So getting involved with your local community and being a good guardianship of the land. One of the things that I really love about Idaho and where I live is that there is so much public land. So learning how you can be a responsible user of that land and make sure that you are living as sustainably as you can where you are, I think is really important. And then also, getting involved in being aware of who's making the decisions for you about your land. So learning more about your local government, being there to vote for what you believe in, I think is a really important step, because ultimately all of those decisions are going to be happening through, our elected leaders.
Exactly. Yeah. Everything you said, I think, is perfect advice. I think conservation can be sometimes daunting, and it just seems like there's a lot going on in the world, and it seems like it might be hard to reverse the actions of our human impact, and then but we just disappeared for a sec. Yeah, it really is all about that individual action, and even supporting the organizations. Look in to see what they're doing, if they're sustainable, or even if they're supporting an organization that's improving wildlife, and just making sure that all of your actions are really enhancing the health of the planet rather than detracting from the health of the planet. Sara, could you shed a little insight on your perspective?
Yeah, so I guess I'll probably hit on the number 2 hot topic going around the world today, which is single-use plastic. So we know that plastics are being used at a very high rate. We're kind of in a society where you're always on the go, and so people are looking for fast and convenient ways to do things, and a lot of times that means using plastics. And so we know that these plastics and debris end up in our oceans and our waterways, and it's not just impacting sea turtles, it's impacting a whole host of organisms. At Loggerhead, we've looked at the post-hatchlings that have come in to our center for rehabilitation, and almost 100% of those post-hatchlings are found to have plastics in their gut. So we know this is a major global problem. It's not just people leaving trash on the beach when they go to the beach. It's stuff that's washed up from other communities. You can be inland in Idaho like Sara is, and some of that trash can end up in the ocean. So being aware of your single-use plastic, making sure you reduce your use of it first and foremost, and then reuse and recycle. All of that can help, again, no matter if you're inland in a landlocked state, even there it matters, because it does all end up kind of in the ocean and coming back to us in animals, either in entanglement or ingestion. So I think that's the second biggest hot topic right now.
And I know a lot of members of LMC are big proponents of the fourth R, refuse. If you don't need it, you don't have to accept it. Don't feel obligated to. If you're participating in an event that gives out, awards or shirts or marketing materials, you don't have to take it, and it will affect their projections for the next year. If an event had 500 attendees and only 250 took the free giveaways, they're going to reduce the amount that they have, or even sparking a conversation if you are somewhere and you see a small change that people could make. A lot of times individuals are not aware, and I think you guys see that when you're out on the beach doing your research. And Sara, I'm sure, Dr. Hoffman, I'm sure you've seen this in your research as well. Sometimes people are just not aware about the impact they're having on a species, whether that's, being too close to a turtle or interfering with the species, or I know you're really not supposed to touch coral. You probably saw that when you were researching, and just bringing education and awareness. Sara, do you have any resources or recommendations of how individuals can take action and help improve the health of the planet?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we touched on it, right? So refusing, reducing your use, bring your own reusable water bottle, bring your own reusable bags. Those are simple little things that I promise are easy, that you can learn to integrate into your daily life, and they do in the long run make a large impact. And then again, like we've kind of harped on, is just get involved with local organizations. That's the best way that you can help, and it's easy. It's right there, right around your doorstep. There are a bunch of organizations out there. We all have the same mission. We're all working towards the same goal. So get involved locally, and figure out how you can help your local communities.
Awesome. And Dr. Justin, could you tell us what Justin might be frozen. Oh, he's back. Justin, can you tell us some of the alarming trends you've recently seen that are posing threats to different species, and some advice you have for people to be able to take action to improve the health of the planet?
Yeah, so I think, kind of a third major threat that often gets kind of overlooked or ignored is that it's also known as climate change's evil stepsister, and it's ocean acidification. So as our global temperatures rise, that can actually change. And as there's more carbon products being released in the environment, that actually changes the chemistry of the ocean and makes it a little bit more acidic. So the pH of the oceans is declining or becoming more acidic through time. And that's leading to a number of kind of developmental anomalies in a number of species, particularly a lot of the invertebrates, like corals, and a lot of crustaceans like crabs and lobsters and things like that use calcium for their shells. So if you've got a lot of acid in your system, it can often degrade some of those, those building blocks, or those chemical building blocks that you need to make your body. And so we're kind of seeing a lot of that through time as well. And I think another kind of major threat, I don't know if it's a threat or something, is kind of a lack of general understanding by the general public. So scientists for a really long time talked scientifically, and we use really big words, and it's, that's not effective. And so what we as scientists have to learn to do is translate a little bit easier for the general public so that they can understand. So, when we say reduce your plastic use, we we're not saying don't use any plastic at all, because that's impossible. You can't even buy toilet paper or, a pair of scissors or something without, being wrapped in plastic. And so it's just making the message a little bit easier for people to understand. No, you don't have to eliminate everything in your daily life, but there are some things that are very easy to do and understand, like bringing your own reusable bag, or refusing a straw, or, refusing single-use plastics. And I think it's just, instead of kind of the word vomit and showing, giving everything that everybody can do all at once, I think it's a little bit more effective if you just stay on message and stick to something a little simple, like, say no to straws to start and see how that goes. And if that works for you, then you can get your own reusable bags. And if that works, and then you can kind of go on from there. But you just, I think it's important for people to realize that every little bit, matters. The whole world was essentially shut down for about 2 months, and we already saw improvements in the environment. So it really won't take that much for us to change. If every person changed just a little, it would have, these really drastic impacts. And so I think that's kind of something that's, missing is a lack of understanding from a lot of people. And that, if we just made it a little easier from our side of things, then I think we would be a little bit more effective at getting those conservation messages out there.
Definitely. And I think that, having people that are interested in conservation and helping, break down that messaging to their families and friends really helps as well. And offering to be, that translator if you're really passionate about conservation, taking the time. If you're in research, I know all three of you are insanely busy and always have multiple projects going on at once. But if you have the time to share resources on your own personal pages and break it down and simplify it, and kind of be those guides when you can be. But before we sign off in a few minutes, I wanted to ask you guys one last question. So we're trying to provide viewers with resources or citizen scientist apps or books or podcasts, any of that sort that you guys really enjoy listening to and you think are good sources for ocean conservation and wildlife conservation. Dr. Hoffman, could you share a few?
Yeah, so I think it's kind of about biology as a whole, but one of my favorite podcasts is called Ologies by Allie Ward. And she does a great job of talking about all of the vast amount of research that's happening in the world. And I know that even being in the field of biology, she talks about things that I wouldn't even have thought about. So that's one of my favorite things to do. And yeah, I think I just, when, I try to be mindful of what I consume on a regular basis as far as media content. And so keeping track of, organizations that are actively working towards this type of ocean conservancy is, I think, a really important thing to do.
And is there any way for viewers to be involved with BioMark, from either following you on social media or helping you spread your message? Can they help BioMark directly?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are on Instagram and Twitter as @BioMark Inc. INC, and we are also on LinkedIn and Facebook. And so a lot of the times we will share material about what our collaborators are working on. So I know that this is Sea Turtle Week, so we are featuring some of our collaborators in the sea turtle world, including Loggerhead Marinelife Center. So if you follow us on social media, that's probably the best way to hear about some of the efforts that we're doing, from pit tagging sea turtles to pit tagging rocks to see how our rivers are changing with differing flow regimes. So, yeah.
Awesome. And Sara Hersh, can you provide us with a few of your favorite resources and ways for individuals to get involved and learn more?
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of books out there too that are super inspiring and influential in starting to learn about some of these impacts. So a lot of people have heard probably Rachel Carson's Silent Spring or E.O. Wilson's Letter to a Young Scientist. There are a lot of books out there written by scientists and conservationists that really kind of show you maybe historically how they got started, how they got involved, and really where they see the future going within our fields. And so I think there are a lot of great books and resources out there from very well-known scientists and conservationists that really have some great ideas that even if they were written, 20, 30 years ago, are still relevant to us today.
Yeah, I think books, especially from like the 70s when conservation was really starting and getting organized, a lot of those, fundamental books are still relevant. And I love that a lot of those scientists actually have their own platforms as well, where they share content. So I know Sylvia Earle shares a lot of content on her platforms, and I follow her just to become a little more aware of what's out there. And I try to follow a lot of scientists from local organizations like Biomark or Loggerhead or the Ocean Conservancy, and just following the scientists, because you never know what's going to cross your newsfeed and give you a new perspective. And Dr. Justin, can you provide us with a few tools and resources that are helpful for learning more about research and wildlife conservation?
Yeah, so I think if, sea turtles in particular, we have, something called the Sea Turtle Listserv. It's the letter C followed, by the word turtle. And if you're interested in getting involved in turtles, there's all different, in sea turtles, there's all different kinds of emails that go out, regarding internships or jobs or graduate programs or undergraduate programs and things like that, that you can learn a lot from, or kind of, if you're interested in that career path, and I'm sure there's listservs for all different types of animals out there as well. Another thing would be, just looking up your local kind of wildlife organizations that are in your area and seeing what they do. So like we at LMC have a mailing list that you can sign up for, and it tells you about our beach cleanups and all of our different events and different ways that you can get involved with us. And so, those are, wildlife facilities are present, really globally, and particularly very high and very high prevalence in the United States. And so that's kind of another way that you can, figure out things that are going on. Like our local Palm Beach Zoo has, talks that they offer every now and then, and there's a lot of stuff like that you can kind of follow and get involved with that way.
Awesome. And last question before we go. So when it comes to saving a species, what is the number one tip / advice you have, or what is the number one reason why we should save a particular species? So one that you guys have worked on, for example, sea turtles. Dr. Hoffman, if you want to go.
Yeah, sure. So I think that we know that species fill really important ecological roles. And so if we see the reduction in one species, we see the reduction in all of these domino effects. And so I think that even if it's, maybe it's not a species as charismatic as sea turtles, for example, but even starting with seagrass, if you don't save the seagrass, that is going to have cascading effects on something like the sea turtle population. So being aware that at all levels, every part of our environment and the ecological system is playing a role in maintaining that balance is really important. And as those things start to skew, then we're going to start to see really big cascading effects.
Awesome. And Sara Hersh, can you provide your insights?
Yeah, so I think what's really cool is that we at Loggerhead specifically use sea turtles as our, species out front. They're really charismatic. People get hooked on them because they're such amazing animals. But the steps that you can take to help sea turtles can also help a variety of other species. So some of the things that we've touched on, lighting, keeping our beaches dark, that doesn't just go for our beaches. Even if you're inland, turning out your lights at night can help a host of other species, from birds and bats down to insects. So I think that there are a lot of things that if we do on a daily basis from anywhere in the world, you're not just helping one species, you're helping a whole bunch of species. And so I think that's one thing that we really need to highlight, is that you're not just doing this to help one single organism. You're doing this to really help the entire ecosystem. And as Sara mentioned, it's all interconnected. And so we want to make sure that we're protecting everything from the little guys all the way up to the bigger creatures.
Yeah, I think something they tell you in college is college students are really egocentric. And all of you getting your master's have probably experienced this as well. When you're getting your master's, you really had to be concerned about yourself and your work and your research goals. And unfortunately, this problem applies to just the human mindset. We're trained to be very self-absorbed because it's a survival skill. It gets things done. But when it comes to our environmental impact, we have to realize that the entire world is connected. And if we don't step outside of our own little self-circle and realize how our daily lives and even our own households affect everything, we're not really going to improve the health of our planet and ultimately us. And Dr. Justin, just last before we sign off, could you provide your thoughts?
Yeah, I think kind of one of the biggest things that I start saying in a lot of interviews now is it's really important for people to remember that this is the world is one planet and one ecosystem. So what impacts one species impacts everything, including humans. Oftentimes we as humans, we are very egocentric, and we often put ourselves on a pedestal like we're this special species, and we're really not. We're just really glorified primates that can talk, so we at Loggerhead, we kind of use the sea turtle as a sentinel or a model for the other species that are present on our planet. And so touching on the plastics, those you may not care about sea turtles or sharks or whales or birds or bugs or whatever it is, but these plastics that are being ingested by certain marine animals, they're being taken up by the smallest of creatures, from phytoplankton all the way up to these large whales. And for the sea turtle, they eat a lot of things that we eat, and so if they're eating plastic, we as humans are also eating plastic. So if you aren't particularly interested in the environment or in an organism, you should hopefully at least be interested in your own health. And so it's important to pay attention to what's happening with these animals that we're using as model species for ocean health, because that also tells us a lot about our own health. And I think that's often forgotten with a lot of people, is that just because we're humans and we're the smartest beings on the planet, and we have different ways of communicating, but we really aren't that different. We're impacted in the exact same ways as everything else is.
And I think that's perfect. I've always heard that humans are the only species that produce waste that nature can't digest. So really, it sounds like we're the problem, and most things have it right. But just reminding everyone that, it is up to us. We created the problem, and now we created the solution. Well, thank you, all of you, for joining us. This definitely inspired me. I find all of your work super interesting, and I hope our viewers do as well. In our blog link, we'll give them direct links to some of the work that you've worked on, so they can learn a little more. But thank you. I'm left inspired, and I hope our viewers can realize that find what I learned was research that you're interested, or the species you're interested. Find a way to take action and help, and stay motivated. So thank you, all of you. I hope you have a happy World Oceans Month.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.